The Rohan Hours is an illuminated book of hours from the early 15th century. It is fairly held to be one of the finest and most striking in existence, with many of its images made in an intense, even agonized style that has prompted comparisons with El Greco and the Expressionists. In fact, this grim style pervades every aspect of the Rohan Hours, to the point where one might almost call it a Gnostic prayer book. Art historians who write about illuminated manuscripts tend to put most of their energy into determining which artist in a given workshop executed which of the images, what earlier manuscripts served as models for the illustrations, who commissioned the work, and who owned it afterwards. These are points that I will largely pass over, since the information tends to be scanty, and even if it were richer, would add relatively little to our appreciation of the entire book as a coherent work of art. A book of hours, such as we see in this vignette from Mary of Burgundy's late 15th century copy, is an abbreviated version of the Breviary, the daily prayer book of monks and nuns. Books of hours began to be popular with the laity in the 12th century. The prayers focused on the special veneration of the Blessed Virgin and were a sign of the broadening popular piety which would characterize the late Middle Ages, when the new bourgeois class demanded a Catholicism that took as much account of private religious experience as of sacramental action. But at first, books of hours were the fabulously expensive preserve of great nobles. They were treasures and trophies that gave shape to a genuine demand for a spiritual life among the highest class of laity. A book of hours began with a calendar of church holidays ornamented with seasonally appropriate vignettes, and that is what we have here. On the January page, we are shown a man warming himself at a fire. He has evidently just come in from the cold with his dog, for he still wears his hat, gloves, and cloak, while his dog sits up in front of the blaze, the better to expose its chilled body to the warmth. In the sky above, we see the zodiac sign Aquarius. The Middle Ages considered astrology to be an essential science, and the influence of the stars upon all mortal activity was unquestioned. The prominence given the zodiac emblems in this and succeeding pictures is deliberate and significant. In the Rohan Hours, we have a further and quite unusual feature, pictures from the Bible moralisée, the Bible explained. This was a sort of comic book version of the Bible made for the edification of French royals in the 13th century. An abridged retelling of the biblical narrative, it featured scenes from the Old and New Testaments, juxtaposed to show how the former had prefigured the latter. The art and commentary, of inestimable value in understanding medieval piety, are frequently quite anti-Semitic. I will pass somewhat rapidly over this material. The limitations of past ages, once acknowledged as such, have little more to teach us. The Bible explained vignettes that accompany the entire Rohan Hours were based on those in the so-called Angevin Bible, a Bible explained made in Italy a little earlier. This Angevin Bible was copied by the Rohan workshop with such an independent attitude to the images that we will frequently need the Angevin to interpret the Rohan. The first image in the Angevin shows God creating heaven, earth, and the four elements. The images are accompanied by glosses in Latin and Old French, so we are rarely in doubt as to what is intended. God appears here in the person of Jesus, as his face and cruciform halo make clear. Jesus is, of course, the Logos, God's creative word, by which he spoke and it was. He holds a round cosmos with dry land in the middle of blue water. The sun, moon, and stars are floating amid sky and clouds, while a watery band of firmament surrounds all. A very methodical presentation of all things together in the primal chaos. The Rohan version shows God the Father rather than Jesus creating the world, and the heavens and earth are given as a cloud band around a dark globe, an obscure little planet. God in the Rohan image seems to be tiptoeing around, looking carefully for a safe place to set down this burdensome world. In contrast to the Angevin, here God is bent forward under the world's weight, and his look of creator's satisfaction has been changed to one of worry. Here I am undertaking an entirely new interpretation of the illustrations. It has been noted that the Rohan images alter significantly the original ones in the Angevin, so much so as to make them hard to understand as illustrations of the texts given. This has been explained away as mere incompetence on the part of lesser workshop artists. I believe we can better appreciate the art of the Rohan workshop if we view these deviations as deliberate and carefully in keeping with the pessimistic and tormented large images which are attributed to the anonymous Rohan master. The Angevin continues with God's separation of darkness from light. The emergence of light signifies, we are told, the creation of the angels and of the church. We see rays of light descending from the original illumination to produce the angels, who stand on starry spheres to show that their station is in the heavens. They have 6 wings each, following the description of the seraphs in Isaiah. The church receives her heavenly illumination enfolded in the scriptures, which descend directly from the hand of God. In the Rohan, God is receiving illumination rather than directing it, like a Gnostic lesser deity. Due to the need to place the Angevin's double images on 2 separate pages in the smaller Book of Hours, the twinned images are all divided, with some interesting consequences. While in the Angevin the scriptures transmitted celestial light to the church, here they trail irrelevantly on the ground. In the Rohan, the angels and the church are alike denied illumination, and in fact the church no longer looks towards the angels but towards the starry spheres at their feet, as if the angels were Gnostic archons controlling the starry wheels of destiny, and the church mistook this for revelation. The face of the left-hand angel expresses placid contentment, while the angel at center just looks baffled. In the Angevin, God creates the heavens and the earth surrounded by the sea. Though the heavens aren't shown, we do have God raising a hand to command the separation of earth and sea. The scriptures emanate from God's hand down to the world, where they are embodied by the church, standing with a lance and a chalice, wearing a golden crown. The church stands in the midst of the world. Behind her, tongues of land project into the ocean from the central landmass. The church is firm as dry land, but is continually lashed by the secular world, represented by the surrounding seas. In the Rohan, God similarly creates earth and sea, but the scriptures have been turned into a banner declaring Jesus Christ creates heaven and earth, a note which was necessitated by the deity's God the Father appearance. Illumination still descends onto rather than emanating from this God the Father. Instead of the scriptures descending from heaven, we have the medieval equivalent of a word balloon, which seems to reduce Jesus' role in the creation to a bare claim. The church is assailed by the world in the Rohan as well, but the tongues of land that emerge from behind the church in the Angevin, defining her as solid ground, have become a jagged corolla of starry sky, and the encroaching waters now look more like golden flames. In the Angevin, she was placed like the source of the lands. Here she seems beset by auric fires. Her expression has changed from one of otherworldly hope to one of disappointment. Here we are in the month of February, as is clear from the sign of Pisces in the sky. The old man is taking off his wet boots and stockings as he prepares to enjoy his meal. Behind him, a jug of wine is warming by the fire. The next pair of Angevin pictures show God separating earth from sea, populating land with trees and birds, and the sea with fish large and small. Note that we have a mermaid among the fish. The earth signifies the church, while the birds indicate those who attempt to destroy it, tying cables to her spires to pull them down, or trying to set her on fire with torches. The large fish represent bankers who prey upon the small fish, the poor. We see one behatted Jewish moneylender pouring coins onto a table, while a poor debtor is stripping off his shirt to pay the interest on a loan. The Rohan makes a more refined job of the separation of earth and sea, with long-legged wading birds and an elegant little mermaid submerged in the waters, while God daintily raises his robe so he won't get it wet as he wades into the ocean. The explanation is likewise Lux. The victim of usury is stripping off a gold-embroidered shirt which he offers to a moneylender even more clearly Jewish, both by his exotic hat and his full beard. The arc of land on which the background church stood in the Angevin has been replaced by an arc of waters, showing a noteworthy attention to the metaphor. The month of March, under the sign of Aries, is devoted to the care of fruit trees. One peasant prunes the branches, while another uses a hoe to loosen the soil at a tree's roots. It's still cold early spring before the leaves have begun to bud. Next, the Angevin shows God creating the stars, the moon, and the sun which lends the moon its light. The sun signifies the deity, the moon the church, and the stars all who share in the church's holiness in their varying degrees. Divine illumination descends through the scriptures as evinced by the book with celestial cover designs from which the rays of enlightenment descend. In the Rohan, God is giving orders to the sun and moon which have descended from the heavens to sit on the horizon and listen attentively. The implication seems to be that these are the luminaries of a lower, lesser world. The Angevin has a brown arc below the heavenly book, which was probably meant to suggest the land's horizon. It was not felt necessary to further indicate the earth on which the faithful kneel. Gold leaf supplied the lack of any further landscape. The Rohan artists took their model very literally here, and the horizon line was represented not by a brown line, but by two scrolls labeled Earth. The sun and moon appear on a cloth from which the two scrolls depend. Kneeling figures on the ground adore this hermetic-looking show of banners in the sky. Just as Jesus was only represented as a banner in the hands of the demiurge in the image of God creating the heavens and the earth, here the world seems reduced to a bare assertion, as if to insist upon the unreality of our world, actually existing like words on a scroll, in name only. At top, the Angevin's delightful vignette has God furnishing the seas with fish of various species. God wades into the transparent waters, which have such exotic inhabitants as an octopus and a mermaid. The latter is examining two fish disappointedly, as if she had expected these poor creatures to be better company. Below, we learn that the species of fish represent the various kinds of people who live in the world. At top left, we have a pair of lovers out on horseback. To the right, a marital spat. At bottom, we have, left to right, a pair of illicit lovers, a chess game, and a money changer. In the middle of the image, the boaters bob along happily among the fish, underlining the metaphor of the human world as a populous sea. The Rohan repeats the image it used for the creation of the birds for this of the fish, only here God has a more genial expression. The artist clearly enjoyed depicting the fish, some of which seem to be sea serpents, and we have a lobster in place of an octopus. The mermaid was, of course, too good to pass up. There is greater variety to this world as ocean. Two friends here ride a single horse, and instead of the quarreling couple, we have Jesus in the temple instructing the elders. At bottom we have left to right, lovers, a game of checkers, and the money changers. The boating scenes, like all the rest of the image, are far less playful than in the Angevin. That was a floating world. This is a world in earnest. The main image for this page is April, represented by a young noble on horseback under the sign of Taurus. His splendid robe with the trailing ornamental sleeves, his magnificent and elegantly beribboned horse, His hunting dogs and the sprays of lilies of the valley he carries in his hands make him seem almost like a character out of the tale of Genji. Only the Gothic world had none of that faintly sad self-awareness we find in Heian Japan. Mono no aware, the sense of transience, which gave a pastel shadow to the courtly loves of the Shining Prince, is quite lacking here. French painting would have to wait for Watteau to achieve that. This chevalier is worldly and confident, riding under the sign of Taurus, whose fertile influence seems to have filled the trees with birds. The artist has, a little wickedly, made the source of God's illumination in the smaller frame the rays of the springtime constellation, which may account for God's good mood.